3 days after I signed a $55 million licensing deal, my wife slid divorce papers across our kitchen island and told me we should do this while the numbers were still clean. That was the part that stayed with me. Not the papers. Not even the timing. The way she said it. Calm. Practical. Like she had been waiting for my work to become real money before she made her move. What she did not know was that I had been waiting too. My name is Ethan Mercer. I was 49 when this happened. And for 7 years I had been building a portable water filtration system out in my garage. Not as a hobby. Not as some late-life distraction. It started as engineering work I believed in. Then turned into the only thing I cared about getting right. The deal came through on a Friday afternoon. Clearflow Dynamics licensed the patent. The number on paper was $55 million. Paid out through a structured agreement. Not one giant wire landing in my account all at once. That part matters. People hear a number like that and picture instant money. Real deals do not work like that. Real deals come with schedules. Signatures. At conditions. And lawyers billing by the hour. I knew that. Claire knew the headline. By Tuesday morning, she was standing across from me in our kitchen with a thick envelope in one hand and a green smoothie in the other. The kitchen looked exactly how it always looked. White cabinets. Gray stone island. My coffee mug near the sink. A pen beside the fruit bowl. That pen was mine. I used it for lab notes. Rough drawings. Numbers I did not want to forget. Claire set the envelope down in front of me. Then placed the pen beside it with 2 fingers. Sign when your lawyer tells you, she said. I looked at the envelope without touching it. What's this? Divorce papers. She said it flat. No tears. No build-up. No speech about growing apart. Just business. I picked it up. Heavy paper. Expensive firm. Her attorney's name in the corner. She took a sip from her smoothie while I opened it. You want to talk about this now? I asked. We should do this while the numbers are still clean. That was her line. Still clean. Like my marriage had become an accounting window. Claire was wearing black athleisure. The expensive kind that looks plain until you know what it costs. Hair tied back. Nails done. Phone face down on the counter. She would not look at me for more than a second at a time. I turned one page. Then another. She had already asked for half of everything tied to the patent. Current licensing revenue. Future payments. Support. Asset review. Full disclosure. Not a separation. A cash out. We've been done for a while, she said. This just makes it easier to move on fairly. Fairly. I remember looking past her shoulder at the back window over the sink. The grass needed cutting. There was a hose coiled by the fence. Normal Tuesday morning stuff. That almost made it stranger. A man can stand in his own kitchen, holding divorce papers, and still notice the yard needs work. This changes a lot. I said, it changes a lot for you. She said, I'm claiming what's mine. That was when it stopped feeling vague. This was not about distance. Not really. Not about lost connection or 2 people drifting apart. This was timing. She had waited until the patent was valuable in a way she could point to. Then she acted. I set the papers back on the island and lined the edges up without thinking. I do that when I need a second. You may want your attorney to check the dates more carefully, I said. That got her attention. Her eyes came up fast. What does that mean? I took a drink of cold coffee and let the cup sit back in its ring on the stone. It means you're assuming I spent 7 years in that garage without thinking ahead. Don't play games with me, Ethan. I'm not. She stared at me for a second, waiting for more. I did not give it to her. That was the first thing she got wrong that morning. She thought quiet meant shocked. She thought still meant weak. She thought I was standing there trying to catch up. I wasn't. I had already done that part 2 years earlier. On a summer afternoon, with a half-open patio door and a glass of water in my hand. That was the day I heard my wife explain my life's work to her friends like it was something small and embarrassing. And after that, I stopped building just the system. I started building protection around it. That afternoon had been hot enough that the garage door stayed half open. I was working on prototype 17, bent over a pressure housing that had already failed twice that week. My fingers smelled like solder. There was a burn mark on my left thumb from earlier that morning. I had been chasing one bad sensor reading for almost 6 hours and getting nowhere. At some point I realized I was reading the same numbers without seeing them. So I went inside for water. The kitchen was cooler than the garage. Quiet at first. Then I heard voices outside. Claire had friends over on the patio. That part was normal. Tuesday afternoons. Wine glasses. Talking loud enough that half the house heard it, whether you wanted to or not. The patio door was cracked open just enough to let the sound in. I reached for a bottle from the fridge and heard my name before I twisted the cap. Is Ethan still out there? One of her friends asked it like she already knew the answer. Claire laughed first. That short laugh she used when she wanted the next sentence to land harder. Still out there, she said. Same wires. Same little test tubes. Same look on his face like he's about to save the world. A couple of them laughed with her. I stayed where I was. Bottle in my hand. Fridge light still open. Another voice asked, "What is he even building now?" Claire answered right away. Some water thing. He says it could change access in poor places. Then she changed her voice. Not exactly mocking. Just enough to sound like me. Flow rate matters more than volume if the pressure drops. More laughter. That part I remember clearly because she copied a sentence I had said 2 nights earlier over dinner. On the patio table, there was a plate of strawberries. One of them had rolled close to the edge. Next to it sat a folded brochure for a yoga retreat I had paid for the month before. I do not know why I noticed that brochure first. Probably because I had mailed the payment myself. One of the women asked, "Do you think it's ever actually going anywhere?" Claire took a second before answering. That second mattered. Honestly, I think it's his version of buying a motorcycle. That got a bigger laugh. Then she added, quieter, "I'm giving it 1 more year before I make him stop." Nobody said anything for a second after that. Then someone said, "You're patient." Claire answered, "I'm practical." I closed the fridge with my elbow because I still had the bottle in my hand. No one heard it. Or if they did, nobody changed tone. I stood there another few seconds because once you hear people talk about you like that, your body does something strange. You do not move right away. You wait. Like maybe there is one sentence coming that fixes it. There was not. I set the bottle on the counter. Did not drink it. Did not walk outside. Did not ask why she was telling strangers my work was something to tolerate. I just went back to the garage. The stool near the bench was where I left it. One wheel stuck slightly because of dried epoxy. I sat down and looked at the circuit board in front of me. The solder point I had finished before going inside had cooled uneven. That was all I looked at for maybe 5 minutes. Not angry. Not even surprised in a clean way. Just clear. Very clear. That evening, Claire came inside carrying empty glasses and acted normal. Asked if I wanted chicken or pasta. Asked if I had made progress. I said, "A little?" She nodded like that was enough. Nothing in her face suggested she thought I had heard any of it. That night, she went upstairs before 11. I stayed in my office, The house got quiet the way houses do when every door is closed and one floorboard still clicks near the stairs. I opened my laptop and searched 3 things: asset protection, patent ownership in divorce, how intellectual property gets counted before separation. Then I kept reading. Articles, law firm pages, tax notes, state filing rules. Around 2 in the morning, I wrote one name on a yellow pad. My brother. Daniel. Because I already knew one thing by then. If Claire thought this work was temporary until I became useful again, then I needed to make sure she never stood next to the finish line, pretending she built any part of it. The next call had to be quiet, and it had to happen before she noticed anything had changed. I called my brother the next Monday from my truck outside a coffee shop 3 towns over. Not because Claire checked my phone. She usually didn't. Because I did not want that conversation happening inside my own house. The truck was off. Windows cracked a little. Receipt on the dashboard from gas that morning. I remember folding it in half while the phone rang. Daniel picked up on the second ring. "You okay?" He asked that before hello. That was Daniel. Older by 3 years. Straight to the part that mattered. "I need you to sign some things for me." I said. A short pause. "What kind of things?" "Legal things. Business filings. Trust paperwork." Another pause. Then, "Does this have something to do with Claire?" Yes. That was enough for him. Send it. No speech. No questions about whether things were bad. No asking if I was overreacting. Just that one word. Daniel ran a medical supply company in Colorado and had spent most of his adult life reading contracts. People hoped he would not read carefully. He understood timing better than most people. That afternoon, I contacted the attorney his company had used before on licensing work. Her name was Rachel Stone. Her office sat on the 3rd floor of a brick building downtown, above an insurance office and a dentist. No luxury lobby. No polished marble. Beige carpet. One fake plant. Near reception. Rachel met me in a conference room with one legal pad and a black folder. She looked at me for maybe 5 seconds before speaking. "Tell me exactly what exists right now." So I did. The prototypes. The pending patent. The testing records. The early talks with companies already asking questions. Claire. The patio conversation. Everything. Rachel listened without interrupting. When I finished, she opened the folder. "If you do this late, it fails," she said. "I know. If dates overlap wrong, it fails." "I know." She looked at me again. "Can you follow instructions exactly?" "I'm an engineer." That got the smallest nod. Then she slid the first page across the table. "We built Blue River Systems Incorporated first. Delaware filing. Separate corporate ownership. Not complicated on paper. But every date had to line up clean. Blue River would hold all intellectual property tied to the filtration system. Not me personally. Not my marriage. The company." Rachel explained each step slowly because one mistake later becomes a weapon in court. Daniel became trustee on the second piece. Mercer Family Trust. His name on paper. My name where it needed to be. Ownership layered legally before anything public happened. Every prototype receipt after that got logged. Every pressure valve. Every filter membrane. Every order for testing parts. Even the stupid small things people ignore. Like replacement clamps and shipping fees. Rachel told me once, "Courts trust paper more than memory." So I gave paper everything. I opened a separate account for consulting income from side work. Not hidden, just clean. Documented. The patent filings moved under Blue River. Research expenses moved there too. The hard part was not paperwork. The hard part was coming home and acting like nothing had shifted. That first week after meeting Rachel, Claire asked me at dinner if prototype 17 had stopped leaking. I was cutting chicken when she asked it. The plate between us. Ice in her glass. Her phone beside the fork. Mostly. I said, "You've been out there late every night." "I'm close." She gave a small smile. "That's what you said last year." Then she looked back at her phone. That line would have hit harder before the patio day. Now it just sounded like information. A few days later, she left for a weekend retreat she had already booked months earlier. The yoga brochure from the patio table was now clipped to the fridge with a magnet. 3 days away. Silence in the house. I used most of that weekend to scan old lab notebooks. Dates mattered. Handwritten dates mattered even more. Rachel wanted every notebook page copied. Every early drawing matched against purchase orders. At one point around midnight, I found an old receipt folded inside a binder from 2 years earlier. Copper fittings. $9.40. I kept it. Not because $9 mattered. Because dates do. By the time Claire came home Sunday night, Blue River existed. The trust existed. The first wall was already up. She came in carrying a tote bag and asked if I had remembered to water the plants. I said yes. She never asked what I had done all weekend besides work. And I understood something that night sitting across from her while she unpacked herbal tea and retreat notes. People miss quiet changes when they believe the other person is staying exactly where they left them. 3 days after Claire handed me the papers, she posted the first photo. I saw it sitting in my truck outside Rachel Stone's office. The engine was off. My folder was on the passenger seat. Her name came up on my phone because she had tagged herself at a rooftop place downtown called Westline Terrace. Claire stood near the glass railing, holding a champagne flute. City lights behind her. Dark dress I had never seen before. One shoulder bare. The caption said, "New seasons require brave decisions." That was it. No mention of divorce. No mention of me. But everybody reading it knew what it meant, because by then she had already told enough people her version. The comments started fast. "You look incredible. Proud of you. About time." One of her friends wrote, "Finally choosing yourself." I looked at the photo a little longer than I meant to. Not because of Claire. Because she had changed her profile picture too. It was an old picture from last winter. The two of us at a charity dinner, except she cropped me out badly enough that part of my jacket sleeve still showed near the edge. Just a strip of dark fabric and half my cuff. That stayed in my head longer than the champagne glass. I took screenshots. Saved them into a folder Rachel had told me to keep. Dates. Captions. Public behavior. Nothing dramatic. Just records. Rachel came out a minute later carrying coffee and saw me still looking at my phone. "She's celebrating?" she asked. "Looks like it." "Good," she said. People talk too much when they think they're already winning. Inside her office, Mark Benson's first demand letter was waiting. Claire's attorney. Heavy paper again. Same expensive tone. He wanted 60% of all marital assets. Not half. 60. Patent revenue included. Future licensing included. Spousal support still open. Rachel read it once, then set it down flat. He's writing like he already believes you're nervous. "I'm not." "I know." She tapped one line with her finger. "They think your patent money belongs in a simple marital bucket. It doesn't." "No. But let them keep writing like this." When I got home that afternoon, Claire was at the kitchen island again. Laptop open. Salad container from some health place near her gym. She looked up when I came in. "Mark says your attorney hasn't answered yet." "She will." Claire nodded, like she expected that answer. Then she looked back down. No anger. No pressure. That calm way she had now. Like paperwork had replaced marriage already. That evening she posted again. Not from home. A photographer tagged her in a field outside town just before sunset. White dress. Bare feet. Arms open, like she was feeling wind that did not matter to anyone but the camera. The photographer added a tag. Divorce session. Claire reposted it. No caption this time. Just a white heart. That one got shared by 3 of her friends before midnight. I saved that too. A week later, another post went up. Brunch table. Small flowers in a glass vase. Half an avocado plate. Coffee cup. 4 women tagged. But I noticed one thing right away. Claire's watch in the photo showed 10:14. Her story posted at 11:32 saying she was still there. That mattered because at 11, I had driven past that place on my way back from the hardware supplier. I saw Sienna through the front window. 3 women at the table. No Claire. Meaning, Claire posted old photos to keep the picture moving. Still performing. Still building a story. Later that night, she walked into the living room while I was reviewing supplier invoices. "You're very quiet lately," she said. I kept my eyes on the paper. "Busy. You don't want to talk about what happens after this. We are talking through attorneys." That landed harder than I expected because she stood there a second longer. Then she asked, "You really trust paperwork that much?" I looked up then. "I trust dates." She gave me a look I knew well. Not anger, not confusion. Just that slight narrowing she used when she felt something was happening outside her view. The next morning, I noticed another small thing. Her profile picture changed again. The cropped dinner photo was gone. Now it was just her alone. Same dress. Same night. Same background. No trace of me left. But she forgot one thing. The original photos still existed online in the charity gallery. Timestamped. Public. Still there, if anyone wanted to compare. I saved that too. Because Rachel had been right. People leave more behind than they realize when they think the public version is stronger than the real one. And Claire had started believing her own version now. That usually makes people careless. About 3 weeks into the divorce, I woke up at 2 in the morning with pain across the center of my chest. Not sharp, heavy. Like somebody had set a concrete block there and left it. The room was dark except for the clock on Claire's side of the bed. She was asleep, facing the window. I sat up slowly because the first breath felt wrong. I waited a minute, thinking maybe it would pass. It didn't. By the time I got downstairs, I was holding the kitchen counter with one hand. My car keys were still in the bowl by the door. I remember dropping one the first time I reached for them. I drove myself to the emergency room because at that hour your brain does stupid math. You tell yourself if you can drive. Maybe it is not serious. It was serious enough. The nurse looked at me once, called someone over, and within 10 minutes I was flat on a bed with wires on my chest. A doctor came in before sunrise. Gray hair, tired eyes, direct voice. "Stress is catching up with you." He said it while looking at the monitor. "Heart attack." "Not this time." That was his exact answer. Then he said, "Severe angina. Medication. Observation. 2 days minimum." I stayed because he did not sound like a man giving suggestions. I did not call Claire. I texted Daniel once after daylight. "Hospital. Table. Don't call yet." He arrived that evening anyway. Still wearing travel clothes. Coffee in one hand. Folder under his arm because Daniel never arrived anywhere without paper. He stood near the bed and looked at the monitor before he looked at me. "You look bad." "I feel better than 4 hours ago." "That's not impressive." He sat down and lowered his voice. This is her doing. No. I said, this is what happens when too many things stack at once. He knew better than to argue when I said something in that tone. The next morning, my phone buzzed. Message from Mark Benson. Given recent health developments, my client would prefer accelerated settlement discussions. That was all. No question about how I was doing. No courtesy line. Just timing again. I read it twice, then forwarded it to Rachel. Her answer came back in less than 10 minutes. Save everything. Say nothing yet. When I got discharged the following afternoon, Daniel drove me home because the doctor said not to drive myself. The house looked normal from outside. Mailbox closed. Front steps clean. Nothing obvious. Inside felt wrong immediately. Not dramatic. Just small things. The office door was not fully shut. I always closed it. My filing cabinet drawer looked straight until I touched it. Then I saw one folder sitting half an inch farther forward than the others. Blue tab folder. Utility records. Not important, but not where I left it. My desk drawer had fresh scratches near the lock. Thin marks. Metal against metal. I crouched down and looked closer. 3 shallow lines. Recent. Daniel saw my face and asked, "What?" I pointed. He did not answer right away. Instead, he looked toward the hallway. Then I walked to the smoke detector above the bookshelf. Unscrewed the cover. Small camera behind it. Installed 3 months earlier. Not because I expected this exact thing, because once paperwork starts, trust usually leaves first. I pulled the footage onto my laptop. Yesterday afternoon, Claire entered the office wearing kitchen gloves. Yellow dish gloves. That part almost made Daniel laugh. Except nothing about it was funny. She tried 2 keys first. Neither worked. Then she used something thin near the lock. Took pictures with her phone. Opened folders. Checked inside envelopes. At one point, she held up an old tax return like it might suddenly become useful if she stared longer. 40 minutes total. No panic. No rush. Just careful searching. She found nothing that mattered because Rachel already had the real files. Daniel leaned back in the chair when it ended. She wore gloves. Yeah. She thought about fingerprints and forgot cameras. I copied the footage 3 times. Laptop. External drive. Cloud folder Rachel had set up. Then I sent her 1 file with 1 line. She searched my office while I was hospitalized. Rachel called less than 5 minutes later. Do not mention this to her. Why? Because right now, she thinks she got away with something small. That helps us more than confrontation does. Claire came home around 6. Gym bag, over one shoulder. Grocery bag. In the other hand, saw me at the kitchen table. You're back. Doctor let me go. She set the grocery bag down and looked at the medication bottle near my hand. You should take care of yourself. I watched her while she opened the fridge. Same voice she used when talking about weather. Same, steady movement. The yellow gloves were folded under the sink door behind her. Still damp. Court came on a Thursday morning. Cold outside. Dry air. The kind that makes courthouse steps sound sharper under dress shoes. Rachel met me near security, carrying 1 black folder and a paper cup of coffee she never finished. No extra briefcase. No rolling case. No stack meant to impress anyone. Just 1 folder. Claire arrived 10 minutes later with Mark Benson. Navy suit. Hair pinned back. Small earrings. Nothing flashy this time. Mark carried enough leather to look expensive from across the hall. He gave Rachel a short nod like he still believed this would go the way he had written it. Claire looked at me once and then past me. Not angry. Just controlled. Inside. The courtroom smelled like old paper and floor cleaner. Judge Ellen Parker came in exactly on time. Silver hair. Reading glasses low on her nose. Voice that never needed volume. We sat. Mark stood first. He asked for full disclosure of all current assets, all intellectual property, all licensing revenue tied to the filtration system, and any corporate structure connected to recent transactions. He spoke cleanly, confidently, like every sentence had already been tested out loud before morning. Rachel waited until he finished. Then she stood and handed one document to the clerk. No speech first, just paper. The clerk carried it up. Judge Parker looked down, turned one page, then another. The room stayed quiet longer than expected. Mark noticed first. "What is Blue River Systems?" he asked, before the judge spoke. Rachel answered without looking at him. "A Delaware corporation formed 18 months before the filing date." Mark took his own copy and started reading faster. I watched Claire because that was the first time she heard the name. Her head turned toward him immediately. "What is that?" she asked, under her breath, but loud enough that I heard it. Mark did not answer her. Rachel kept going. "Blue River holds all patent rights, development records, licensing agreements, and related intellectual property tied to Mr. Mercer's filtration work." Judge Parker lifted her eyes. "And Mr. Mercer's role? Technical consultant. Salary documented through company payment structure." Mark stepped in then. "Your Honor, this appears to be a deliberate effort to separate marital assets before dissolution." Judge Parker looked back down at the filing dates. "Was the corporation active before divorce proceedings?" Rachel answered, "Yes. Tax records included. Operating expenses included. Patent transfer dates included." Every answer came short. Nothing extra. Mark turned pages harder now, fast enough that one corner bent. Claire leaned toward him. "Why didn't you know this?" That came out sharper than she meant. Judge Parker heard it too, but said nothing. Instead, she looked directly at Claire. "Mrs. Mercer, did you participate in development of the technology?" Claire sat straighter. "I supported the household while he worked." Rachel wrote something down but did not interrupt. Judge Parker asked again, "Did you contribute to design, testing, filings, or licensing negotiations?" Claire hesitated. That pause mattered more than her answer. "No." "Did you review or sign any corporate filings tied to Blue River Systems?" "No." Judge Parker nodded once. Then she looked at Mark. "At this stage, these documents place the corporation outside the marital filing window unless fraud is demonstrated." Mark tried again. "We need additional time to investigate intent." "You have 30 days. Judge Parker said. "No emotion in it. Just schedule." Then she added, "But suspicion is not proof." That landed hard because even Mark stopped talking after that. The hearing ended without noise. No dramatic reaction. No raised voices. Just chairs moving and papers being gathered. Outside the courtroom, Claire stood near the glass doors while Mark spoke low and fast beside her. She barely moved, like she was listening but not catching up. Rachel capped her pen and put it back in the folder. "They came in thinking the patent sat in your checking account," she said. "They still think there's something hidden. They'll keep looking. Let them." I looked through the glass again. Claire finally turned toward me. Not anger now. Not even blame. More like somebody trying to place the exact moment a floor changed under her feet. For the first time since the papers hit the kitchen island, she looked unsure of what existed and what only looked obvious from far away. That mattered more than any speech could have. Because once people realized they misunderstood the structure, Every decision after that gets slower. And slow usually tells the truth. Mediation happened 4 weeks later in a room that looked like every other office built for uncomfortable conversations. Gray table. 2 water bottles. 1 box of tissues nobody touched. Claire came in wearing a plain sweater and jeans. No suit this time. No careful jewelry. Her hair tied back low. Mark Benson looked tired enough that even his tie sat wrong. Rachel placed the settlement packet in the center of the table and opened it without ceremony. No long introduction. No pressure speech. Just paper. Current offer, she said. Mark read first, then pushed it toward Claire. The room stayed quiet while she went line by line. The lake house stayed with her. The car stayed with her. Her checking account balance stayed with her. $3,200. No claim to Blue River. No claim to future licensing. No spousal support. No percentage of patent revenue. 1 non-disclosure agreement attached to the back. Claire stopped there. That's it? She asked. Her voice was low, almost flat. That's what exists inside the marital estate, Rachel said. Claire looked at me then. Not the quick glance from court. A full look. I gave you 23 years. I kept my hands flat on the table. You gave me years where you kept waiting for this to fail. Mark shifted in his chair but did not interrupt. Claire looked back down at the paper. You're saying none of that counts. I'm saying you called it temporary until somebody else paid for it. That stayed in the room a second. Then Mark leaned toward her and spoke quietly. Discovery risk. Judge. No stronger position. Claire picked up the pen. A cheap office pen from the mediator's tray. She signed slowly. At the NDA page, she stopped again. What exactly am I not allowed to say? Rachel answered. Internal company details. Licensing terms. Corporate structure. Proceedings. Claire gave a short breath through her nose. Can I talk to family? Rachel looked at me. I nodded. Immediate family only. Claire signed the last page. The mediator stacked the documents and slid copies across the table. When Claire stood up, a folded payment notice slipped halfway out of her tote bag and landed near her chair. Country club dues. Past due. Red print across the top. She picked it up fast. But not before I read enough. At the door she stopped. Were you planning all this before I filed? I started protecting it when I understood what you thought this was. She left without answering. 2 months later, Daniel called while I was in the garage. He had heard it through someone who knew the realtor handling the sale. Claire sold the lake house faster than expected. Not because she wanted smaller, because carrying it alone cost more than she thought. A week after that, I drove past the storage place near the highway and saw her there by accident. Rear hatch open. 2 floor lamps. 3 boxed kitchen sets. A rolled rug tied with cord. No movers. Just Claire loading it herself. 1 box at a time. She did not see me. I kept driving. The country club membership ended that same month. No announcement. Her name just disappeared from the member list. By fall, she had taken a consulting job with a regional firm outside the city. Still working. Still moving. Just smaller. 8 months later, I stood backstage in Seattle holding a microphone I did not need but still had to wear. The National Water Systems Conference rented a ballroom overlooking the water. 300 people in rows. Engineers. NGO teams. University buyers. My son Noah stood beside me, checking the mic clip twice. You good? He asked. I'll know in 5 minutes. The screen behind me showed one of the Kenya installations. Blue tanks. Pipeline. Morning light. I walked out when they called my name. I talked about what changed between Prototype 17 and deployment. Why maintenance mattered more than launch. Why local operators mattered more than imported parts. Afterward, a young engineer waited near the aisle. He shook my hand with both hands. "Your system is running near my town," he said. "My sister doesn't leave before sunrise for water anymore." That stayed with me longer than the applause. That night, Noah and I ate near the water. Halfway through dinner, he said, "Mom called last week." I nodded. "What'd she want?" "She asked if you were getting another award." I set my fork down. "What did you tell her? That you're where you wanted to be?" That was close enough. Later, my phone buzzed. Rachel. Another licensing group. University expansion. More paperwork. More years ahead. I answered after dessert, because by then, the work had become simple again. Build. Review. Sign. Keep moving. The rest had already sorted itself. If you had been sitting in that mediation room, would you have said more when she signed? Or left it exactly where it landed? Share your thoughts in the comments. If you enjoy stories like this, subscribe to Quiet Family Justice.